Hi, I'm James Taylor.
And I'm Alison Burns.
And together we are
the Ethical Futurists.
Now, you're listening to the Ethical Futurists podcast, where we dive into the world of sustainability, ethics, and why these ideas today are more important than ever before. Now, join us as we engage with leading thinkers, with business leaders, with academics, with entrepreneurs, with investors, and change makers to uncover the latest ideas shaping a more ethical and sustainable future. We're going to be covering a lot of different things in this podcast as well.
We are indeed. From sustainability, innovation to future trends and ESG.
Our conversations span a wide array of topics, including renewable energy. We're going to be looking at clean tech, ethical investing,
food systems, and much more.
Yeah. In each episode, we explore really crucial issues such as carbon emissions, the circular economy. We're going to be talking about rewilding,
net zero carbon goals,
and the future of food and energy, something that Alice and I are really passionate about.
So whether you're interested in lab-grown meat, alternative proteins, sustainable finance, or climate-related risk, we've got you covered. Are you looking to secure a keynote speaker who's well-versed in sustainability, ESG, or any of the engaging topics featured on the Ethical Futurists podcast? Well, look no further. Connect with the experts at Mena Speakers to book your ideal speaker today.
Just go to mena-speakers.com. That's mena-speakers.com. Alternatively, you can drop them an email at book@mena-speakers.com to book the perfect speaker for your next event. Hassan Habib is a trailblazer in the world of industries of tomorrow, driven by a boundless passion for the future. His expertise in artificial intelligence has been pivotal in a myriad of groundbreaking digitization projects in both banking and non-banking sectors, propelling organizations into the next frontier of innovation. Beyond his technical acumen, Hassan is a values-driven leader who champions the principles of ESG and sustainable development goals. Hassan has served as a trusted advisor, helping clients develop investment strategies that align with their values and sustainability goals. Hassan, welcome to the Ethical Futurists.
Thank you for having me.
What's going on in your world just now? What currently has your focus?
A lot going on, isn't it? So we are recently just out of Ramadan, that's one thing. But another thing is also that we recently also came out of the pandemic not too long ago. Mm-hmm. And the world is at a very different place now. So when it comes to innovation, when it comes to newness, how to do things in a different way and where to head over the next 10 years, I think priorities have reshifted and refocused on a lot of different themes. Among them happens to also be a key theme of ESG and sustainability. We saw the COP28 successfully being done here and raising billions of dollars for in funding in order to enable the transition. And I think that's a great achievement and very much to the leadership here and the leadership of COP28 as well.
Great. And in your current role as a futurist and investment advisor, what would you say are your top accomplishments?
I think the beauty of being associated perhaps with this theme is to do with that you can bring about change and a lasting change. And when it comes to investments, for example, and when it comes to anything to do with capital market, this is what sustains a lot of change, right? This is how the money is perhaps trickled. I think that's where the actual beef and the fun is, that you're part of the process of a lasting change rather than something that could be a more short-lived cycle. This tends to continue, and then my dream has always been that the moment when I retire or when I'm, God forbid, sick in bed or anything such, I look back and when I'm pondering upon myself, what did I do with my life? I would like to think that I brought a change that still exists to that day.
Now, you and I, we met up the other day in Al Sakal Avenue, a beautiful area here in Dubai, and we were talking about electrification and mobility. And I said to you, Hassan, I don't see many Teslas here. Well, can you explain that to me? And you explained to me how, I think there's about 3,000, 5,000 EV points at the moment, but then you explained what's going to be happening next. So can you tell us a little bit about what the kind of vision is and what the future is?
Right. So, according to some data and statistics, currently there are somewhere around 3,000 to 4,000 charging stations in the nation, and I think that is infrastructure related to EVs. And in order to enable EVs and to make it as rather a norm, right? Today, when you and I want to go buy a car, we think very little about, okay, what kind of fuel car do we want? Is it hydrogen fuel cell? Is it EV? Is it a petrol, a hybrid? We just happen to choose the brand. Say we want an X car, and if that X car happens to be running on gasoline, then that is it, right? We tend to accept it. I think that is changing, and people are more realizing the value in either going much more efficient use of transportation or motorized transportation here. And it is important for this infrastructure to grow with it, because only that can enable it. Otherwise, it will be like, for example, you have one petrol station in a population of, let's say, 10,000 people. You'll have always, lines lined up. So that's kind of bottleneck it creates. So currently, I believe, according to some statistics, we have about 3,000 to 4,000 charging stations, and this is set to grow exponentially over the next 7 to 8 years. And with the strategy that is in place to harmonize and normalize the use of EVs, perhaps even for the roads here in the UAE, we will be seeing this number go up to as much as perhaps 60,000 plus. Okay. Which means the gas stations that you see today perhaps will become an enabler for charging stations as well. They may have in the future, not so deep in the future, but near future, they may have charging stations in the petrol stations where you could be parking your car and charging quick charges over the span of 20 minutes or half an hour.
And here in Dubai, I noticed that it's very much a lot of apartment living. And I go into our apartment building we stay in, and I go to the garage area, and we actually don't have a car here because it's just so easy. There's actually a really good metro here as well, and easy to get around. But I noticed there's no EV points in that. And it's one of the well-known companies that's built this apartment. And so can you see that starting to change as well? Because that's always a difficulty, I know, in the UK, retrofitting some of these apartment buildings.
Correct. So as we are today, most of the buildings were constructed, of course, pre-pandemic, and the focus on the sustainability has been not too long. From 2015, 2016 onwards, especially when it comes to capital markets or so. But while ESG focus and environmental, let's say, consideration has always been in place, I think the trickle down to a society level, to a social level, has been very recent, right? And you will see that change as well, we expect. Today, most of the buildings do not have charging stations, and they don't facilitate for it. If you are living in an apartment, chances are you do not have a charging station in your apartment. Now, if you are living in a villa or a townhouse, you have the luxury of installing it by yourself and having that as a...
So that's where all the Teslas are then, in other words.
So hence, you see where I'm going, connect the dots,
exactly,
right?
Exactly.
So if you have a Tesla, chances are you're living in a villa.
Okay.
So that becomes one of the bottlenecks as well, that even if a person is living in an apartment and chooses to own Tesla, for example, or any other EV car, it becomes a challenge for them to charge that EV car in the building, unless the building is providing, which I believe is very, very low in terms of penetration. So a lot of then such people tend to charge their vehicles in commercial areas, like perhaps the malls or other commercial areas, which is not so convenient, right? And I think as consumers, we are always chasing convenience, right? You will today you will order on application your food rather than going there and taking a takeaway or having it there a lot of times. So it comes down to convenience and having that infrastructure of multiple charging stations across the nation, and having legislations and perhaps also a framework around real estate, where perhaps charging stations become a required service to have within a building, I think that could change. It could be a game changer as well. Yeah.
Yeah, that's driving sustainability, though, isn't it, in relation to energy and power. You advise organisations on why and how best to assign capital to ESG investments. And we hear lots of terms about responsible investment, sustainable investment, and impact investment. Can you explain to us what the difference in those terms are?
So I've been associated with the industry for quite a while, right? My experience has always been, I'm a more finance person since the very beginning. And pre-pandemic, post-pandemic tends to be, the pandemic tends to be the line where things changed. We see a lot of focus on ESG investments. And as you mentioned, a lot of people, when they understand ESG investments, they just club it into one area, that this is ESG investment or this is sustainable investment. But there are multiple types of ESG investments and different intensities, if you would like to put it that way. You have something called responsible investing, then you have sustainable investing, and then you have impact investing. And depending on what you are, how you classify, there could be multiple more as well, but more or less these are major buckets. So in responsible investing, it's more about how do you invest into areas that mitigate SDGs or climate-related impact, right? So it's more, if you want to put it in English terms, it's more like, how can I harm less? How can I reduce my greenhouse emissions, for example, and reduce the impact on the environment or any particular SDG goal or as a whole? Then you're talking about sustainable investing or sustainable in the sustainable bucket. So the word sustainable, as it is self-explanatory, but it's more about how can I, in a broad term, how can I not just reduce, but even contribute to negative emissions, right? So one is reduction of emissions. You're still not going down to negatives or zeros, right? So let's say if you're in a scale of -5 and +5, you want to, in a responsible, if your approach is responsible, you're looking at to be somewhere between 1 and 5. If your approach is sustainable, right, you're looking at going towards the negative. Right, you're like, no, I want to be net contributor or have an effect on the ESG index as a whole, perhaps on an organization level. Then you have something called impact investing. Impact is you identify a particular goal and say, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to create the most an impact. So you have sustainable development goals. You could select any particular goal, let's say in this case, climate action or climate change. You actually make it your goal to not only reduce, but not only go to negative, but stay there. And that's your approach. So you're more determined to a specific goal. Sustainable is a broader term, and then responsible is much broader term. So as you go narrow down your focus and your approach on investments or how you run your organization, it comes to be, are you an impact-driven leader? Are you a sustainable leader? Are you a responsible leader?
And right. Do you see a shift in how investments are moving, especially after the pandemic?
I think the shift has already begun quite a few years ago. I mean, some of the data suggests that even from 2015 onwards is where the shift started having an effect in the market. But post 2020 is much more, let's say, evident. It's something that has surfaced and has taken a mainstream. So between 2020, if you see, until 2023, 2024, even in the capital markets, in terms of how ESG related investments have performed, as opposed to non-ESG related investments, volatility, or let's say from a mathematical term, standard deviation has been higher in non-ESG investments. And in ESG investments has been either half or just above a little bit of half in terms of volatility. In terms of returns, pretty much within a similar bracket. Now, if I put it in English, right? Would you take higher risk for an X return, or would you take lower risk for the same X return? right? It becomes a little bit a choice, right?
So it's almost like when companies think or individuals think about, should I put some money into stocks or an index, or should I put it into bonds, for example? They have different risk profiles as well.
So given that the returns are, let's say, identical, would you choose the harder way or the easier way, right? Usually, I mean, the common sense says, I'll take the easier route. I'm getting the same return. Why take a higher risk, right? If I tell you your capital is in trouble here, but you're going to get 5%, and I'll tell you capital is protected here, and you're going to get 5%. It's a no-brainer. So I think that is a point to note, that between 2019, 2020 onward, we have seen some data suggests that ESG-related investments have performed better or in par with lower risk, right? Volatility in the sector tends to be so far even lower comparatively to non-ESG investments. However, ESG investments are more longer term, right? So investors looking for short-term returns, and by short-term I mean like between 1 to 3 years or so, then it's unlikely that ESG will perform in a similar way as a non-ESG. So this is a point that must be noted as well. I mean, it's not an identical, let's say, playfield over here, but at the same time, if you have a long-term approach, someone who's trying to build a portfolio over the longer term, then ESG is a better alternative, or having an ESG allocation. But if not, if you're looking for a short term, so far the data that I've come across is suggests that there's more than on non-ESG side. So it's a short term. It's also a horizon. What are you looking towards, and how long are you looking towards into it?
Now, you mentioned that word data, and Alison and I spoke at an event recently. We were talking about to some different CFOs and chief investment officers, and they were talking about all these different reporting standards that you have when thinking about ESG investments. And so explain to us, like, let's say if I'm I'm an investor, or I'm someone advising people who are looking to invest in ESG funds. Where do I go? What is the numbers? Who is the trusted source when it comes to data?
That's a very good question. So currently, when it comes to measuring ESG, there are multiple, let's say, reference points that could be used, even when it comes to ESG reporting, for example. You have, for example, OECD norms, then you have the ILO, and then you also have UN Global Impact, and you have more. But these tend to be more commonly perhaps used or referenced to. And hence, I think that this is a challenge, right? Where we don't seem to have currently a standardized approach, but I think that's changing now, with especially in this region, given there's heavy focus on sustainability going forward with net zero ambitions by 2045. I think things are now consolidating and more standardizing as we go forward. But so far, I mean, that had been always a challenge in terms of, okay, what kind of reporting do you follow? What is your reference point? What's your benchmark, right? And if that is always changing, then you cannot deduce from that you're on the journey of sustainability, because you can only determine your milestones if you have a framework to match it against. And if a framework and the reference point is not static, and it's not constant, then you always have the challenge, okay, how do you measure yourself against those? Are you measuring yourself against the ILO reports? Are you measuring yourself against the OECD or the UN Global Impact? So I think standardization is necessary. Today we have multiple standards, but coming to common grounds, it's very similar to any framework, right? Today, for example, when you talk about financial industries, you have the risk metrics and risk framework, the Basel III and so forth. Why is it standardized, right? I mean, there's a reason for that. I think for sustainability and sustainable and the reporting on ESG also, this is going to be crucial going forward, that there's a standard set out and there's a proper framework in place. And it is treated as a theme rather than as a good to have CSR initiative, for example, right? So by theme, what do I mean is that I shouldn't be in a position as an individual where I go like, okay, I've got $100 in my pocket. Here's $20 for XT. So for example, if I commute 10 days in a month, 2 days I'll commute sustainably, 8 days, I don't care. No, I think by theme, I mean it becomes a going concern that I go about my daily life while making ethical decisions in the process. I think that's where we're trying to get to. And standardization, that's what it will help with.
I often call that my ethical filter. I try to put everything through an ethical filter on a daily basis. So what would you say, given all these challenges, what's the hardest part of your job? In a nutshell.
I think there are a lot of stereotypes when it comes to, or let's say misconceptions. I mean, I wouldn't use the word stereotype, but there are a lot of misconceptions when it comes to ESG or ESG-related initiatives or investments or sustainability as a word. And the misconception is that when it comes to, for example, investments, the misconception is ESG investments do not give you returns in par with non-ESG investments. I think data suggests otherwise, or has started to suggest otherwise in recent times. Also, when it comes to, for example, choices you make, right? You're having a coffee, paper cup or non-paper cup, plastic cup, what to choose. I mean, this is a very basic choice, and you and I we make thousands of decisions every day as humans. If we just have the right filter in our minds, I think just by having that, we can do a lot in terms of, we can shift the industry within a span of few years, less than even, and we can achieve the net zero much, much more earlier. And I think that's that's important at the moment, is to view it as a filter, as a theme, and to even, let's say, demystify or debunk the myths around sustainability that exists when it comes to putting your money in. Because it's important, investments, banking, are more or less the core of an economy. And the change must begin in what is at the nucleus of things, right? And I think that's where we can bring a great difference. If people are aware that I just gave you some information around standard deviation and risk metrics when it comes to investments. If I do know, as an investor, for example, or even as a consumer, that if I do X thing, by doing this, I can do it in a more risk mitigated manner, and I can do it in a more efficient manner while having no impact on the outcome that I desire out of it. It's a no-brainer that I would choose that way. But the misconception out there stops me to do that, right? Because I have already assumed if I'm sitting on this side of the table, wrong example, but if I'm sitting on the consumer side and someone comes to me, tries to sell me a coffee, and he's giving me in a plastic cup, and for me, coffee matters, right? But if I have no understanding of perhaps I can change this cup to a more efficient recyclable paper cup or otherwise, right? But if I have that choice and I'm aware of that choice, that this is going to give me a better product for the same price, it doesn't matter to me, then I will make a smarter choice. But I need to be aware of that choice. So if I walk into a coffee shop, it gives me a plastic, I automatically, for example, assume that all they have is plastic cups. So I don't ask, right? But imagine that only from a cultural perspective, there was a placate out there in front of the coffee shop, or a brochure in front of you, in front of the cashier, please ask for paper cups or reusable cups, right? It would click that awareness in me, and I'm like, okay, I would like that. And in a lot of places, you'll be surprised that it's for no additional cost. A lot of places have already implemented the change and eliminated the use of plastics, and we're going towards that. Even in the UAE, so use of plastics is going to be, something of the past. But it's important to understand that as consumers, whether we are consuming, money and investments, whether we are consuming entertainment and leisure or whatsoever, we must be aware of the choices we make. And we must, if we are not, we must be made aware, right? I think awareness in a lot of people changes choices. I've come across people, for example, from my past life and so forth, is where when I talk to them about certain opportunities, and I tell them, look, what is your criteria? And they say, my criteria is ABC. I'm like, I can get you ABC, by doing in a much more better and sustainable manner. So, okay, they have no reservations with that.
It's kind of planting the seed that those options are there.
It makes them think as well. And a lot of times, even then, a lot of time what happens is they do come back to you as well, and then they actually ask for that particular way of doing a sustainable way of doing things.
Great.
And that has happened with me. So I know that there's inclination out there. I know there is willingness. I think it's more about awareness and debunking the myths around sustainability.
So final quickfire questions.
Quickfire questions.
Before we start to finish off here as well. You go first, Alison.
Okay, my question again. Is there a book that you can recommend on sustainability or ESG or sustainable investing that you could recommend to our listeners?
Or another topic, something that you're just kind of obsessed with just now as a book.
I think sustainability begins with mindset. And it's important to not see sustainability as a particular product that I can enter or exit from. It's more about you being in it, like culture. I mean, can you exit a culture? No, I'm sitting in front of you, I have a certain culture, and I will reflexively behave in that kind of culture. Imagine sustainability becomes culture, right? And I think that all starts with your mindset. So taking a step back, instead of reading about sustainable investments or sustainability, read more about the psychology of money.
Good point.
Right? Yeah. It's and there's a book called The Psychology of Money as well, and I would perhaps recommend that to the listeners as well. Now, that is how you need to think about money as a whole. Like, what does money enable you to do? Right? Money enables you to buy goods and services. It's a medium of exchange, but it is also a medium of change. Right? If I do have, let's say, a wealth, I do have, I'm a businessman with an influence, I can use that to bring the change, right? Today, a lot of investments, why are a lot of investments going in, for example, having EVs? We see today here, even in the UAE, a lot of EV cars have made their way through to the UAE. Up until 2-3 years ago, we just had one brand or so, right? Or two, if you were lucky. But today, you get EV brands in cars everywhere. The reason that is also because people are putting the money in the right place to bring that change. Now, whether if you remove that from the picture, I as a consumer today, if I don't get a car, I can't commute. So I will go and buy a petrol car. But now I have a choice. Who made the choice? Who enabled that choice for me? Someone who invested into bringing the EV here in the market, right? So money can also be a medium of bringing change. So I think we should more understand how to approach money first, and then use that money responsibly, and that will lead you to be ethical in your choices.
This is the psychology of money, and we'll put links to that here on the show as well. As we start to finish up here, I just want to ask, where's the best place for people to go if they want to learn more about you? I know you've got a podcast, you've got lots of things kind of going on. Where should they go if they want to check out more about you and your work?
They can always catch me. I'm up and down the roads here.
On Sheikh Zayed Road.
Absolutely, or one of the highways. But you can always reach me I have a YouTube channel as well, if I may. It's called The Real Hassan Speaks. And you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'd be very much happy to hear from people and respond and meet and connect, even if it's just for socializing purposes. I would love to do that as well.
Fantastic.
I'm a very social being.
Hassan Habib, thank you so much for being a guest on the Ethical Futurists.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
If you're considering making sustainability or ESG one of the themes for your next conference, your event, or perhaps a company retreat, then why not invite Alison and myself to be your keynote speakers or event MCs? We've delivered really inspiring co-keynote programs for some of the world's largest organizations from all different kinds of industries. Now, the Ethical Futurist keynote will take your audience on a journey to discover how the world's most ethical and sustainable companies are really innovating in their industries. So if you'd like to learn more about booking Alison and I as the Ethical Futurists for your next event, then simply head to theethicalfuturists.com/speaking. That's theethicalfuturists.com/speaking to schedule a call to discuss with us your next event. We're delighted that you listened to this podcast, and we'd really thank you if you could just take a moment now to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform. Also, while you're there, why not give us a 5-star rating and leave us a review? It would really mean a lot to Alison and I. So from me, James Taylor.
And me, Alison Burns.
Thanks for listening to the Ethical Futurist podcast.